Hello, everyone. It is time for another episode of Masks Off. I'm Tia.
And I'm Kim.
And we decided today that we're going to talk about another mask, one that we haven't yet talked about. So we're going to talk about the Peacemaker Mask. I don't know if that resonates with any of you listening. If you feel like you are always trying to create and make and find peace within your family or your life, and that you step into that role of peacemaker. So starting with the quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself." And I love that because it takes, again, instead of looking for peace on the outside, we have to first find peace within ourselves. And did you want to add anything before I share a story about Peacemaker?
No, I totally love that quote as well. It's about taking personal responsibility and not being a victim, because only you can, bring peace for yourself.
Correct.
Love that. So yeah, no, jump right in, share.
All right. So before, as you all know who listen, Kim and I kind of just check in before we record an episode. And this experience I had growing up, or not growing up, when my kids were growing up, where I really would wear the Peacemaker mask. And of course, it still shows up time to time. So for those of you who don't know, I was an only child. I found out later I have a siblings when I turned 18 that I didn't know about. So I technically am not an only child, but I was raised an only child. So that's the only experience I have, is being an only child. So I did not understand sibling relationships, still don't, because while I have relationships with my half siblings, I didn't grow up with them, right? We've never lived in the same house. So I don't understand how siblings interact. It's completely foreign to me. I have no baseline. I may have seen my friends' siblings interact growing up, but it's not the same as having that personal experience yourself. And so I have twins, daughters, and they are now in their 20s. But when they were born and they started to grow and, start to talk and grab toys from each other and all the things that normal siblings do, to me, it just felt like noise and fighting, and I couldn't handle it at all. And especially as they got older and older, because then they'd start to bicker and they knew exactly how to poke the other just perfectly to cause a reaction. Again, normal sibling stuff. But to me, it was an assault on the peace that I wanted in my house, right? Because I had this vision, they're twins. They've been together since literally in utero. They're supposed to have this beautiful relationship, and they're never supposed to fight. Or if they fight, it's going to last for a second, and then they're going to kiss and make up and love each other. Yeah. So here
nice
I had
fantasy.
This. Yes, exactly. Right. So what did I already do? I set up my expectations, right?
Yeah.
So whenever they would start to fight, and they would get physical at times growing up, which just took me to another level, because I didn't understand why would they pinch each other or grab each other's hair or any of those things. So it was an assault on my senses, the noise, the visual, assault on my fantasy, the movie I had playing in my head. So I wanted to make the peace. So I just kept, everyone's like, just stay out of it. But then it would get physical. So I'm like, okay, when do I step in? When do I step out? I didn't understand this dance. And so, having not been a conscious parent, especially at that time, I just wanted to make it all better. And I wanted them to listen to each other, and I wanted them to not ever raise their voice at each other and to just get along, right? So I had to step in and be peacemaker, but when I would step in, I often made it worse.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
Because
yes.
Even if we think we're being neutral, one is always going to feel like you're taking the side of the other, and we don't ever have the whole story. So for me, that Peacemaker Mask really stepped in, and over time, it still activates me. I still want to step in and make peacemaker from time to time, even with them in their 20s, if they start to have a little clash. But it was in middle school sometime, or maybe even a little bit younger. It may have been late elementary. I remember one time they were fighting, and they were upstairs and I was downstairs in the kitchen, probably making dinner or something. And I heard it starting to ramp up and like starting to say things to each other. It's just turned into a something where I couldn't handle it, right? Because there was no peace. And of course, then I go so far in the future, they're not going to get along and they're going to hate each other and they're never going to talk to each other again when they're in their 30s and they're going to be old. I went down that whole journey in my
You
brain.
went 0 to 60. I get it.
Exactly. So I go upstairs and I remember saying, and this was at the beginning of my conscious parenting. So it had to be middle school. So I walked upstairs and I said something like, can you guys just get along? I don't know what I said. Doesn't really matter. But one of my daughters stopped and looked at me. And it was one of those awakening moments. She's looked at me and she said, you might not like how we handle things, but we handle them and then we figure it out and then we get along. So Mom, you need to back off because we've got this. Just because we don't do it the way you want us to, this is how it works for us. And I just remember standing there and my jaw my mouth probably fell open and I just took a breath and I walked away. And that was my beginning of my awareness of my Peacemaker Mask, because it was like, she was right.
Yeah.
Now, did that mean I never stepped in? I stepped in only if necessary. At least I try to. And I notice it's my own inner peace is wrangled. It's not really the external. It's my own inner worries, concerns, fears, and not understanding that, because they would fight and then they're like, make up literally within a couple minutes after they've resolved whatever it is. They didn't hold grudges against each other. So they were finding their peace, just not in the way I wanted them to.
Yeah. So that fear that gets kicked up, what do you think that's about? Like, do you think that's like feeling like the bear is coming to attack you, even though it's the two of them fighting?
I think for me, I mean, it's all inner child wounding. So one of my core things I've worked through over the years is abandonment for various reasons. So for me, when I deconstructed it, it was I didn't understand sibling stuff. I didn't have siblings until I did have siblings, so, but even taking that piece out of it, they were fighting. So there was conflict. I projected into the future that they would end up hating each other, then they would be alone. So I was projecting my own feeling too of like, I don't want them to ever feel abandoned by having them abandon each other, but really it was about my own stuff. So I was completely just projecting.
Wow, that's incredible. That's great that you're able to see that. And what a gift for them, right? That you're able to recognize it at some point, right? And just be able to know that it's you and,
it's always me.
Yeah, I know. Oh my God. Well, thank you for sharing that story, because I can completely relate to all of that as well. Having 2 kids, I did the same thing. Yes. Same thing. Just always like trying to interfere. And like you said, it is true. When you try to get in the middle, one ultimately feels that you're taking that one side and the other one does feel rejected.
Right. And the reality is we don't know the whole story because they're all coming, they're both coming from their own perceptions. And no matter how neutral we could come in as, it's not the human nature of, well, you're choosing sides.
Especially when they're young. So like my kids are 3 years apart. So then you do have like, I don't know if it makes much difference, but it seemed like my son is older, 3 years older than my daughter. And so he was always, for the I would say 90% of the time when they had conflict, he was the one that was the villain, being, highlighted as being the villain. But as you say, you don't always know the whole story. You don't know, like I didn't really know if he was being poked or instigated in some way, or if it was his way of, and I'm talking like when he was 10 and she was 7 and he was, like 13, like young, you know what I mean? Not knowing what was going on. And was it something completely separate and apart from whatever my daughter said or did. It could have been
Exactly.
something else that got him worked up, that
Right.
he maybe then took it out on her, or you don't even know the whole story.
No.
There's so, as we know now, being on this path, that is so multi-layered. All you, even you just shared, like your daughters were having a conflict and an argument, but you recognize that a lot of what was happening was within you, was your own stuff,
Totally.
so we don't know the whole story.
Right. Right. And it doesn't mean that we can't step in as peacemaker when there's sibling issues going on. It's just recognizing, okay, first let me find my inner peace.
Right.
Right. And if you do step in, really having those conscious choices of, okay, how can I continue to stay in this 0 point place, in this place of non-duality, and just being that guide and doing your best. I mean, we can't control if someone thinks you're taking sides or not, but the bottom line is any conflict is co-created.
100%.
Right.
Even when they're young and little.
Exactly. And then they're continuing it, they don't have the skill set. So it's not as simple, but recognizing that, hey, just because one kid hit the other kid, you don't know what happened before then.
Exactly.
And then what happens after. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's nature.
It is. And I think, to go along with what you said about, being more neutral, because I do still step in and, whether I have my hands on the wheel totally, or I'm just gently holding the wheel, what I'll sometimes do is, I will sometimes like hear them going back and forth in an argument. And what else, if like we're in the car, so I'm there, right? I don't have necessarily the option to get up and walk away, which is what I sometimes do. If we're in the house, I'll walk into another room, then they can figure it out. Right. But if we're in the car, so I'll say to like my son, I'll say what I hear Angela saying, because even still, they don't always have the language to express truly how they're feeling. It just goes, and this isn't just with them. This is adults. This is everybody. I was just going to say, this is everybody. Is everyone. Like, this could be a whole episode, like how to communicate when you're upset, because right when we're really triggered and that button is being pushed by the other, the natural reaction is to fire back. And then it's just a blah, 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 blah. You did this, you did that, back and forth. With no listening. But I can hear what's behind it all. So I'll sometimes just gently come in and say to my son, what I hear Angela saying is this, or Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is what you truly feel. And then I'll do the same. This is what I hear Ryan trying to say. Do you hear that? Like, so more of a mediator in terms of just, and then they do respond differently, because then they do hear it differently, rather than me saying, rather than what I used to do when they were little, because I didn't have the skill, is like, oh, right, what, why you blah, 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 or why you, and then just adding fuel to the fire, of just making them feel more upset. So that's how I've shifted my peacemaker into, and it feels different, because it used to feel back then, like you said, it was because I felt so triggered by it. Like my peace was at stake. Now, if I do it, like if I can get into that space that I just described, now I'm more neutral, I'm more calm, and it's not about taking care of an emotional need within me. It's truly being a mediator in that moment. Exactly. And I think also adding in there, so when the Peacemaker Mask comes in, and we're talking like peacemaker, unconscious peacemaker, controlling peacemaker, because there's peacemaker can also be very healthy, like in all of our masks, right? There is always a balance. So recognizing when we step in from that mediator role, we're also not attached to the outcome that we want or we think should happen. Right.
right? When I would step in with the peacemaker mask on from my own inner disruption, my own inner peace not being there, I wanted it just to stop, and I wanted everyone just to get along, so it wasn't a healthy solution I was looking for. I just wanted it to stop.
Me too.
Right? Versus when you come in with the mediator, peacemaker, the healthy, where you're in that neutral space, we don't know what the answer is because it doesn't have anything to do with us. But if we can help the other hear the other from a healthy place with non-attachment, it's a total different energy.
Totally. And I will also add in, because yes, that has made a huge difference with their relationship. And the other thing that made a huge difference is that when I made the conscious choice to let go of the outcome of whether or not they would be close or not.
Yes.
It was so bad when they were teenagers. I mean, well, my daughter's still 19, but when they were younger, it was so bad sometimes, their relationship. I just had to let go and say, if they never speak to each other when they're adults and they're not close and they're, I'm okay with that. Because I need to remove myself from holding on to the expectation of an outcome. Right. My mom used to say it all the time. She's like, I just always want you and your sister to be close. I want you and your sister to be close. And yeah, me too. But there's almost like a pressure there, too, from my mother. It's like, well, just because you want it, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Having a good, healthy relationship comes with nurturing. You have to nurture it. Right. It doesn't just exist just because you're siblings.
Because you're supposed to.
Because you're supposed to. Just because you're born into a particular family doesn't mean that family has to stay in your life for a lifetime.
Exactly.
If they're unhealthy and it's toxic and you make a choice to move away from it, that's okay.
Right.
Especially, if you've tried to have a healthy relationship with that family member and they're not wanting to change, or they're not wanting to grow or work at it, sayonara, baby. I mean, honestly.
Said with love, right? Said with love.
Said with love. Oh my goodness. And you know what? The thing is, I'm sure it's common. You find it all over the place, but particularly one place where you will find people walking away from family of origin is in 12-step rooms. They'll often say that was the family I was born into. And then their 12-step family becomes the family that they choose because, if you grow up in an alcoholic home or a dysfunctional home in that way, and there isn't any change or growth,
right?
It's not going to serve you well to stay really stuck in it,
And it's not serving the other person either to continue that unhealthy dynamic. And there's so much pressure and expectation put on family.
There is.
It's not, not saying you should just walk away from family. Nobody's saying that. But it takes courage to recognize I need to take a step back. And it doesn't always have to be a permanent step back. Or maybe you're like, I can be involved this much, but not that much. I mean, there's no right or wrong in this, but it comes back to healthy boundaries.
It does.
And there's so much enmeshment in families without boundaries because, you're supposed to do everything for your family. But when you're overstepping what you should be doing, you're creating an unhealthy relationship, whether it's family, friends, or whatever. And so recognizing what's good for you, for your soul, for your spirit, and not in a way that's punishing or, because I think it could easily, some people can go, well, I don't like you, so I'm going to punish you and step back. No, it's coming from an authentic place of, we're just going to re-navigate what works, and you can either accept that boundary or not. But this is what I can do.
It doesn't even have to be a spoken boundary. It can be an unspoken boundary.
Right.
You just do that. You just put the distance.
Right. And it looks different for everybody.
And it looks different. It can look different. and it can look
Mhm.
different day to day.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So, well, that was a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Made me remember too that I was
Oh,
there.
oh yeah.
And I'm
And
sure many of our listeners also can relate to that story as well, especially, if they have kids, or if even not having kids, but just growing up with a sibling can
right.
totally relate to that.
Mhm. Or the person who's the middle person, peacemaker between in a friend situation,
Oh,
where they're
yeah.
the one, everyone, each friend comes and complains to them about the other, but the two friends aren't talking. So you're the middle man,
You're the middle
what is it? The
person.
drama triangle, right?
Yeah.
It shows up in all different relationships, not just, siblings and parents.
Yeah. That's a
So,
good point
so
as well.
start noticing where the
Yeah.
peacemaker may be showing up in your life if
Yes.
you're listening. And I'm going to kind of pay attention a little more too, see how it's showing up today. Because as we've talked about,
Yep.
it just transforms and looks a little different over time as you start to make peace with your masks.
Yes. Yep. So this was great that we did another mask episode today. So that was fun to do. And we'll see what we talk about in the next one.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And if you aren't yet, we are now on Instagram. So we'd love it if you'd
Yes.
follow us on Instagram. Kim is doing amazing. She is now an Instagram expert on her way, right?
Yeah, on my way. I don't know about an expert. I'm getting there for sure.
It's
For
fun. So
sure.
yeah, so it's masks at Mask Off Community is the handle. So if you want to
For Instagram,
find
and of
us,
course our Facebook community
yeah,
too.
yeah, we're still doing weekly check-ins there for body, mind, and
Right.
spirit. So we'd love to have you join us.
Yes. And if you like our content, then we would love it and appreciate it if you like or subscribe. And as
And share
always,
with friends.
and share with friends. Yes. Help us to get the message out there. That's what's
Exactly.
key about it, right? Is just
It is.
getting more of this message out.
Exactly. All right, everyone. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening.
Have
See
a
you next
great
week.
day.
Bye.